okay. I'm really okay with that. At least I tried.
Let me come to something else, which is entrepreneurship in this country, and also in some respects globally, has become a young people's game. If you're beyond 30, then you're no longer in the game, you know. And I think it's a bit unfair because once you're beyond that age, then people will consider you a failure if you're still in employment.
No, I disagree. I think at any age, entrepreneurship, you can step out from your job and really become an entrepreneur. But what's happened is we've been fueling a lot of youth and women empowerment because we've seen that the potential is there because they don't have an opportunity cost. They don't have to get out of a job and start doing entrepreneurship. So they're easy startups. And I think the whole startup game in the world has been brought about by a lot of venture capital, accelerators, people who are funding all these guys and saying, here, start up, because you could have an idea that becomes big and scalable. But anybody, even Wallace Kantai, can leave his job and start his own media company or start his own different area. And really today, the internet, the technology we talk about is a leveler. It's leveled the small man, big man syndrome. Because it used to be like it's a big company only that can start it off. All small companies, even a small guy can start up a big company through the internet or through technology. And I think that's where the leveler is. Before, it used to be having a lot of capital, a lot of asset on the ground, a lot of fixed assets. Today, it's taboo to have that. In fact, it's better to have no assets, to have leased out everything and really have space and you have an idea. So scaling up ideas is far more faster. Number two, I think exponential growth is in today. Exponential growth means not just 1 or 2 times, it's 4 times, 10 times, 10x growth, and that's happening. It's not difficult to do that today. Africa as a place is waiting for opportunity. In fact, if you decide, you can see the opportunities in Africa, or Kenya for that matter right now. I can tell you for Kenya right now, you've got market access to the US, you've got market access to Europe, the whole of Africa, right from Libya, Egypt down to Zimbabwe, free market access. Are we leveraging it? Are we utilizing it? No, and that's where the opportunity lies today. We've still been looking at traditional markets where we say it's Britain or it's other places where we export to. Why not look at Africa itself?
George, that age question, I still want to come back to because you didn't do it at 22, you didn't do it at 25, you did it much older. How important is the age question before you think, you know what, I'm an entrepreneur? I didn't need to do it.
I think it's totally irrelevant. First of all, let me address that through talking about business leadership. I took over the Stedman Group. I was managing director at 27 to start with. So I was relatively young. In those days, you're talking about what, nearly 15 years ago? A lot of business leaders then were gray hairs. They were people who have been at it for quite some years. But because I ran that company through a very entrepreneurial sort of approach and engagement with it, never mind that I had a stake with it, but the age thing does not matter at all, particularly nowadays, whereby in the past it did, because you need to do years to gain experience.
I'm actually talking the exact opposite, which is now to be a credible entrepreneur, everyone is looking at your Mark Zuckerbergs, where Bill Gates was when he started, where Vimal Shah was when Bitco started. But if I'm 45, if I'm 50 years old and I'm watching this, I'll think, you know what, I'm a bit too old to be an entrepreneur.
No, I don't think so. I mean, it all depends on what your dream is, because there are dreams that will take a long time to realize, and you probably feel, I better not even start, it's too late. But a lot of the beauty of the business environment nowadays is that it's got a lot of enablers, such as what Vimal has just talked about. So you're able to accelerate the speed of growth of the ideas a lot faster than it was years gone by. Maybe 20 years ago, being 45, you're a little old to start something, as much as you still have so much headroom. But nowadays, you can start an idea within a year or two. It's already a very big idea.
I think there are two phases, right? One is sunrise. Yeah. That's when your 2025s are there at sunrise, and you probably, after 50, you're at sunset, and you're looking down towards that. At sunset, you can actually start incubating these 25-year-olds and start them up and really practice your idea through them. That's the partnership that's available, so it's never too late.
Here is, and you're still free to throw them, but here's a question that was coming in through the interaction. Two people, Alfrico Tieno and Cephas Gadhi, they're asking the same question which any of us would have anticipated would have come. So I'll probably throw this at you, Evans. How can a young entrepreneur with a great idea and no capital start a business? Very related, how do I get people to finance my idea? How can I refine it to get investors? The money question when you're starting up.
I think That's something that is so common. Like a lot of people just the thing that they think is the biggest barrier. But I believe that once you have something that you want to achieve, a lot of people will say no to you at times. Others can align themselves with the idea, but don't just sit there. You have to start doing those little steps.
What? Let me give you an example. I don't know whether that's where this is coming from, but I sit there and you tell me to create a business plan, go to Google, right? I'm sitting in the village, my phone is those old feature phones, so I don't have internet on my phone. I'd need to get on a matatu for 30 bob and 30 bob back. I'd need to go to a cyber cafe and spend 50 shillings sitting on Google to figure out how to do this thing. I do not have that money.
I just think that, the one thing about this plan is, sometimes you don't really need to start with it, If you don't have an idea, maybe you don't have somewhere where you don't understand those things. But if you just have certain goals that you want to be able to do this and make sure that you have certain number of people using the service or product by this time.
Hold on, Evans, before we get there, people will sit there and say, I do not have a single cent.
If you don't have a single cent,
yes,
you have an idea, then you can actually start, with, you talk to your friends, you talk to your family, you talk to, everybody you meet. And if you just have that passion, you will actually knock as many doors as possible. You'll just be able to, you feel passionate about that. You'll keep on talking the same thing to everybody until one person will be able to listen and say, I'm going to believe in you, and you start, with whatever little you have. Sometimes, and you also have to adjust for that. So, if, for example, you have that idea, you have a passion, and you're staying, somewhere where you pay rent, let's say, 25,000 shillings a month. And then you can say, okay, I'm going to, because I really need to start with this. I'm going to move to stay somewhere where I only pay 10,000 shillings. And then the rest, I'm going to start putting into my idea to actualize it. But if you keep telling people, like I have this idea, and they're not seeing you, sacrificing or doing something about it, it takes longer for people to believe. Especially before you reach a level where you need to start writing business plan.
And if you're married, your wife divorces you at the point at which you move to the 10,000 shilling house.
I think every idea is capital. Mm-hmm. This concept of saying, I have an idea, but I don't have capital. That idea itself is capital. Mm-hmm. Now, you don't monetize it without going to people. So, to sit here and say, I have an idea, but I don't have capital, you're just giving yourself a victim feeling. I think if you have an idea, if it's workable, you do your KYC, right? You know your customer, know your competitor, know whom you're up against. How are you going to be attractive to the customer? If that idea works, test it out. If you want capital, there's so much capital available in this world today, including in Kenya. There's so many people just putting their money into stock market, right? We probably need to have that new alignment where we actually put investors together and let people pitch their ideas. And that's what happened even 2 weeks ago in terms of getting these young entrepreneurs talk about it. Really, it is possible to get that capital. So take your idea as capital and say, for this idea, I want 20% shareholding. The 80% shareholding, I want funding from people for equity. Let them hold 80% shares. Run your idea. They'll make you the MD. Start doing it. And then pile on debt onto that and say, fine, here we go. So there are lots of possible avenues for that. And I think this is where we need to address each one separately. But form a group. It doesn't mean you have to have a university degree. It doesn't mean you have to go to university and say, I have an idea. I think most big entrepreneurs haven't even gone to university sometimes. Right? So this whole idea about I haven't been to university, so I don't have an idea. They have ideas. Go and see what Juakali is doing today and scaling up.
I want to look at now the very nuts and bolts of things. In Kenya, at least, there's things like the Youth Fund and other such funds available, and other such institutions available. But the anecdotal stories you'll be told is that not too many people are accessing them. The president gets up every so often and says we're going to have 30%, 40% of government goods and services coming from these groups, young people's groups, disabled, women, etc., etc. But it's simply not happening. What's the problem between the rhetoric that's coming through from government and the practicality of someone coming and saying, I have an idea of a group, let's go and get youth fund money and be able to build a business?
You'd be surprised it's actually happening. There's a lot of youth going into that, getting into it. The only thing is a lot of people haven't brushed their ideas up. They haven't really got the plan in terms of how they're going to supply. They go and get a tender, and then they don't know how to supply it. So there's a 15% allowance for young people and women to get a price difference of 15% extra compared to others. So they've got that advantage too. A lot has been done for them. They need to stand up and get up and say, fine, let me take advantage of this and really go on to it.
Now, I also think that, the whole idea of thinking that, it has to be about, that's just one route that, a lot of young people can use. You don't have to be a entrepreneur to be able to make it. You can still, get a product or service to consumers directly, and you can be able to respond, and you grow your enterprise slowly. So not everyone needs to look at the only avenues for you to be able to provide goods and services to government.
One of the biggest challenges that I've seen in the world is a lot of people, particularly the sort that is asking that question, is yes, they have the idea, but they are not able to articulate it all the way to the end. So come to me and say, George, I need 100,000 or a million, but whatever it is, to say sell potatoes, for heaven's sake. But they cannot be able to articulate how that whole process will happen, how the supply chain will be, how much money they will make, and what will be the residue, and how they'll be able to repay back whatever money that they will borrow from you as a friend, relative, or the bank. So clarity in terms of that vision or that dream or that idea is very important all the way to the end. And when you're able to articulate that, then you're able to, you then get support from, the potential sources of money, without which nobody wants to take a risk.
Smuchi, that capital question, how relevant is it in a Kenyan context? When everyone throws in that, no, I have everything, what I'm lacking is this little big thing called capital.
I think it again comes back down to what is empowering you and what's powering you. So lack of capital can become an excuse, I think. So something that you want to hang your hat on and say, I can't do this because I don't have the capital, versus actually understanding and addressing that what might be happening is that there's a fear going on, or there's something much deeper. There's the ego, where you don't want to risk failure. So I think it's really important to understand that from an entrepreneurial perspective, when you are looking at how it is that you're going to take your idea forward, I think it's important to understand and separate what are the actual facts around it versus what are the barriers that's stopping you from taking it to the next level.
Let's move outside of yourselves, right? Let's imagine once this session is over, you're surrounded by all these guys and they come and say, I believe you, I've listened to everything you have to say, I've internalized it, I have an idea, but there's 10 of them. Who will you listen to, and why would you listen to a particular person? Or if it happens through technology, people start sending you Twitter messages, start sending you messages on all sorts of platforms. How do you differentiate who you listen to and who you don't listen to? George?
Well, good question. The thing is, I think to me it's very simple, because it don't take 5-10 minutes talking about the idea you have for me to establish whether indeed it's a genuine idea that you have, it's personal, and it's coming from the heart, okay? Because one is able to tell by the amount of passion that you have talking about it, and also that articulation that I talked about in terms of all the way to the end.
Now, what happens if somebody is not, because not everyone is the same, or have people who are not that articulate enough. Like, personally, I believe that I was more of an introvert when I was growing up a lot. So it took me a lot of time to be...
How did you manage, by the way? That's a good point to raise.
Yeah, so I kind of, so it's been a transformation. So I think it's knowing your weakness and knowing that you should be able to overcome that. You should be able to learn that. Because I wasn't used to that, to talking to people. I wasn't used to, getting an audience. But now, I've changed that where I speak to audiences in different countries. So, but now that transition, even being able just to articulate what I do, so I really believe that not everyone has the same potential. And so that's why I believe that you should be able to look around, and if you know someone whom you believe is good at times and articulating issues more than you ask for help.
That's a great point, I think, especially around mentorship as well. One thing to recognize and understand, you asked me the question previously in the Kenyan context. If we think about what's going to be going on across the weekend is the capital that's going to flow. So we have to recognize and understand as well that the way that we might articulate a proposal in a Kenyan context is fundamentally different from the way that we might articulate it, for example, to an American investor. What's the difference there? I think that's where we have to find mentors. We have to observe and look at people who have done that well and really sharpen those communication skills. Because, again, to George's point, even if you're going to be selling potatoes, you need to be very clear about what's the unique selling point, what's different about the way that these potatoes are going to be sold, and that's about communication styles.
Vimal, you must get this already. This is not theoretical to you. You must have a lot of people approaching you and saying, if you just listen to me for 5 minutes, I will convince you that you need to back me, not necessarily financially, but even back me reputationally for my idea. What makes you stop for one person and not another?
I think it's very simple. First and foremost, credibility. Credibility comes from 4 things, right? One is integrity, right? What they're saying and what they're doing is congruent.
This is someone you've just met?
Yes, yes. What they're saying and what they're doing in terms of what I see is congruent. Number 2, intention. What is their intention? If they say, I just want to make money or I want to spend money for expenses, you got to get that thing done. Then competency. Do they have the competency to do what they're talking about? Do they not have it? If they lack articulation, if they lack this, that's where they need the help. That's where we need to help them and say, fine, get this thing articulated and connect them to the right people. And that's what you get results from. So when you get connections, you connect people so that they actually know, okay, here's where capital is, here's where this idea can really go through, because everybody approaches us. I get a lot of people calling in that money, and I do connect them, right? When you connect them, you realize they were not able to pull through because they were not either congruent with what they're saying, or the idea was not really in there, they didn't brush it up. So what they need to do is go back, brush it up, and make it better.
But isn't it expensive time-wise to sift through all the people who now get encouraged by this sort of conversation and say, I want to be an entrepreneur? Instead of just trying to figure out who will make it, who will not.
But look, if you're passionate, that's what you're saying, right? If you're passionate about something, you're going to say, why not? Number 1. Number 2, for me, I don't mind doing that because I think a lot of people need that help. And if we've arrived at a certain space, it's probably about giving back. Number 3, I think people need to spend time. It's investing time in articulating yourself and putting your idea together. Because if you don't communicate, you die. I think it's important.
And I think, if the idea is genuine and powerful and authentic and genuine, it will also force you to acquire some of these skills. And I think this is a classic example here. He didn't know how to articulate, maybe with clarity about what he was doing. But his idea, which he was very passionate about, forced him eventually to be able to communicate and articulate with clarity what it is that he wanted to do.
Are we in an age now, Smriti, where the fluff of personality is coming to the fore as opposed to the deeper stuff? So guys who can speak well, guys who look the part, even if the part is not dressed in a suit and tie, but they look like coders, so they're able to get ahead in life before anyone ever discovers it's all a scam.
Actually, I don't call it the fluff of personality at all. It's actually authenticity. And if there's one thing that we as human beings do very, very well, is we're able to figure out who's authentic and who isn't authentic. What we're talking about, again, goes back to the situation. If you are going to be in a room making a pitch, as an example, or you know that a certain person is going to be at an event, George is going to be at an event, and you want to address him, you better have everything sharpened up. You better have a supreme amount of confidence. Let me give you another example. At this 25 under 25 event, there were 3 different people who reached out to me. I gave my cards out to many, many people. 3 different people reached out to me. One person persisted until I said, yes, I will absolutely meet you. Okay?
Didn't you get annoyed?
I absolutely
and
did
I don't mean that flippantly.
No,
the point
I
is that
don't.
people who keep pushing, sometimes you say, you know what, you're not ready for
No, I didn't
time.
get annoyed. I'll tell you why. Because when I look at my email box, there's so many emails. So what this person did, the person was extremely respectful and wrote to me in a way that made me remember him, number 1, and reminded me that I needed to get back to him, first of all. Let me tell you about the other 2 people who also wrote to me. I responded to them too. And that to them should have been an indication that I was engaging with them. They've not written back to me yet. They've not said to me, well, how can I engage you? So I think that's another piece that we have to remember. If you look at all 3 of these gentlemen, and many entrepreneurs out there, all entrepreneurs out there who are successful, persistence is the key. You have to be pushing, number 1. Secondly, you're doing it, if you're doing it through your personality, which is authentic, then absolutely, why not? You must take advantage of all that's been given to you in order to power your dream.
As you sort of come to an end, I want to start with you, Vimal. Is there a legitimacy to the point that I've done all this stuff, started with my passion, started with my love, being able to articulate it, being able to grow it, but now it's time for me to sell off, step back? When do you recognize that point? It may not be for the money, but I have done enough. Let me give it to someone else who will grow it further, and I'll step back.
I think a lot of people have that feeling when they've arrived at the point where they can't scale up anymore and they think their energies are down and they think this was my dream, I've reached it, it's time to pass on and get somebody else to sort of run the battle and start a new S-curve. It's when people don't have succession, that's a big issue. When people don't have a plan to say, now I've reached to my point, where do I go, right? If you go and read Startup Nations by Saul Singer, I spoke to him and we discussed this. In Israel, everybody starts up a company, takes it up and sells it off. Why? Because they don't trust anyone else. They don't trust management to start running it, so they actually sell those companies off. The same way, if you can't trust anyone to scale yourself up, or you can't put in management in place, you have trouble. When you start a company small, you are the operator, the manager, the director, and the shareholder. When you grow bigger, you get out of operations, you get out of management, you stay as a director and a shareholder. And when you really are bigger than that, you get out of directorship and you go into shareholder and you become a capital allocator. That's when you need to move on. Never retire. Like my father says, never retire. So the point is, when you go to that level, you are now at a much bigger level. You will not see the dust on the road because you're at 30,000 feet. So that's where people need to rise up. And I think that's where a lot of people fail. Somehow what they say is, oh, I can't do this, I've done everything myself, it was only me, and then they sell off. And that's what's happening right now. A lot of foreigners would come in and say, I'll buy out the whole company, whereas they could scale up themselves.
Jojo, at what point do you feel I've done enough?
I wanted to comment on something you just said. I've always said that I'm very inspired, very much so, by hawkers, all right? Because of their aggression and their persistence.
Hawkers, the guys who are on the streets
the guys
selling stuff.
They know you.
Entrepreneurs.
This is George, and we even know who he is, but I've got a piece of hardware that I have to sell and, show it on your windscreen. And, he says that. So, aggression, persistence, I think is very important, like you should. So, good point. Now, coming to when do you, hand over the reins. To me, there's no time. Okay? It's not an event. Handing over is not an event. To say that now I'm 45, no, I've run this business for 25 years is time to me, is from the beginning. And the way that is done is you share your dream from the word go with the team that you have and the team that comes subsequently to that. So that at any given time, because God forbid, you can die even without having planned to hand over anything. So at any given time, the team that you're working with must be fully empowered to be able to run that company in your absence. So as a matter of fact, that's why I'm seated here this afternoon. And I encourage as much as possible a lateral system of management as opposed to a hierarchical one.
Evans, you're probably on the other side of your, what you call it, sunrise. You're at sunrise right now. Do you ever foresee that sunset period where you say, you know what, I have done enough. The whole of Africa is lit up, let me step back.
I think so. I think I see what Vipan has talked about. And as you move, you continue growing, and you put in structures, and you whatever you think your vision will keep you going. But you need to know that to have a team that also believes in the same vision. You need to have people that know that they can carry on with the vision. And for me, I see myself already. I'm already doing that.
You're an old young man.
I'm already doing that. Yeah, I'm already doing that. As I've said, because if you're looking at, for example, scaling up into different markets, different countries in Africa, you realize that the dynamics are different, and so you also need people who understand certain dynamics differently. And so it's just if I really want to be able to make something that reaches 10 million people, it really doesn't make sense for me to hold on to something when there are other people who can come in and make sure that that's scaling up happens.
There's something that occurs to me, Vima, and this is specific to you. Africa, rising, African continent of this, whatever. If you had been born in Belgium, if you had been born in Israel, or whatever other country, would you ever have invested here in Africa?
I think it's
a difficult place to be.
Wherever I was born, today in the global context, if you look at all the 5 continents, Africa is the brightest spot for opportunity. If I was in my comfort zone and I had a lot of money and everything else, and I had to invest that money, I would invest it in Africa.
Apple, the company that makes all these devices that we so love, has literally no presence on the African continent except for 1 or 2 spots. Officially, we all buy our iPhones and iPads and whatever other things that we want to buy from Apple through unofficial sources. There is no Apple in Apple Kenya or Apple this. But they have been spectacularly successful. We'll quote them all in all-store books. So is it that they're not seeing what the opportunities are, or they're getting through the back door?
I think they're missing out on the opportunity of Africa because Samsung's taking over. And I think that's important to look at that. But look at what happened on Nokia. There's a company called Nokia, I don't know if you know about it. But
yeah, my first phone.
Right, it existed and it's not there anymore. The point is Samsung's taking